One thing that I find encouraging, I guess, is the best way to put it, is when I have this show and I do this show, I really do it as a hobby. I just enjoy talking about college football, and it's a big part of who I am. I love football. I love the sport. I love talking about it, and I can't tell y'all how much it means to me and how reassuring it is that when I don't release an episode on the day that I normally would release an episode, it's just so reassuring to me that I have people that reach out that are like, hey man, where's the show at? I looked for it on Spotify. I looked for it on Apple Podcasts. I looked for it on Amazon. I looked for it on YouTube. It's not there. And, it means a lot. It really does. It kind of one of those things that keeps me coming back and keeps me doing this, really. I don't do it to hear myself talk, although I do enjoy talking, but I do not record this show to hear myself talking. That would be kind of boring for me. I do it for y'all, and I do it so that I can bring y'all content and y'all can hear my college football opinions, as horrendous as they might be sometimes. You still listen, you still tune in, so shout out. But yeah, my schedule here over the last week, as I've told many of you, we've moved back into our house. So we were out of our house for 15 months, and it was one of those things where it's just been a lot of a transition period, moving back into the house and getting settled. And then we have like a punch list stuff that we're trying to get done. And, it's been a lot. So appreciate y'all hanging in with me here and really being patient with me. My schedule over the last week and a half has been about as screwed up as the college football schedule that the NCAA's got right now. I mean, really, it makes about as much sense as, the transfer portal window opening while the playoffs still going on, so just bear with me. We're going to continue on through the content. We're going to continue on, but got a big game Monday night, national championship. We'll talk about that and preview that game here in just a few minutes. First, a few talking points I'd like to address at the top of the show. But before I do that, I'd like to say welcome back to After the Whistle, wherever you're listening from, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever else. Just want to let you know, hey, as I always do, I appreciate you tuning in. So, for one, happy Friday. First things first, though, we're going to talk about a couple little things that have came up. I know I said earlier in the week on the show, I said, we would have it, potentially might have it later in the week due to the fact that there might be some stuff that comes up that we want to talk about. Well, there's definitely a few things that have arose. Grammar Nazis, you can feel free to correct me there. But there's a few things that I feel we could touch on. And the first thing is this dumb narrative surrounding Carson Beck that Kirk Herbstreit and other analysts and other talking heads at ESPN and a lot of these media outlets, this narrative that they're pushing, that Georgia forced Carson Beck out and Georgia was, mean to Carson Beck and it ruined his mental health and he had to go to Miami to find himself again. Spare me that crap. Like, please, let's get real for a second. If you want to see the timeline, you can go back and you can see for yourself and you can look at it and you can make your own assumption. But Carson Beck last year was a turnover machine for most of the part of the year, a great portion of the year anyway. He was a turnover machine. Interceptions, you name it, threw a ton of picks. Through some games had 4 interceptions. Some games had 3 interceptions. Multi-interception games all over the place last year. Don't get me wrong, the kid's talented, and I appreciate what he did as a Georgia fan, and this is me speaking on this from a Georgia fan's perspective. I appreciate everything that Carson Beck did for the University of Georgia as a quarterback. He sat, he waited his turn behind Stetson Bennett took the reins over and gave Georgia 2 really quality years as a starting quarterback. Now, ultimately didn't reach the pinnacle of the sport, didn't reach the national championship game, wasn't able to get that done, unfortunately. But to act like the school, the staff, the fans turned their back on Carson Beck is lunacy. I mean, you always have that group of fans out there that are like, I don't care about Carson Beck. I hope he loses Monday night against Indiana. I hope Indiana sacks him 10 times. You're going to have that group of fans out there, guys. Like, it's just a reality in the sport. When you have a player that transfers out of that university, the university transfers from, the fans are going to have they're going to have a sour spot. There's going to be some sour grapes there. They're going to talk about him negatively. But when Carson Beck was in Athens, let's think about this for a second. Kirby Smart had every opportunity, and Carson Beck gave Kirby Smart every opportunity and every chance to bench him. Mistakes, bad reads, interceptions, you name it. And Kirby stuck by Carson Beck. And to take it a step further, Kirby defended Carson Beck behind the microphone numerous times last year. I'm sure it would take you a simple Google search to go find some of those instances where that happened. So the idea that the coaching staff didn't want Carson anymore, crazy talk. He got hurt, had a season-ending injury, declared for the draft. Very similar situation as to what we saw with Ty Simpson that occurred over the last few days, where Carson Beck declares for the draft, and at the 11th hour, Miami swoops in, offers him a sum of money that he really can't refuse, and he goes to Miami. There was the only tweets, the only negative things that were said about Carson Beck, the only tweets that were fired off negative about Carson Beck or anything were fan tweets. And it was a few of the fans. It wasn't all the Georgia fans. It was a few of the fans. And that's where we get this narrative from. That ESPN, for some reason, is just dead set on pushing the narrative that Carson Beck, being in Athens and being a Georgia Bulldog was bad for Carson Beck's mental health, and he had to leave and go somewhere else because the situation was so bad in Athens. It's ridiculous. It has no merit. There's no factual evidence to support that. It's just a talking point, and we know how ESPN is. ESPN, they got to have talking points. They got to have stories. They got to say something that makes it sound interesting. Like, before Georgia lost to Ole Miss, the story was, well, if Georgia beats Ole Miss and Miami beats Ohio State, Carson Beck's playing his former team. That would be, a little bit of a revenge spot for Carson Beck. It's not a revenge spot. The kid chose to leave. Declared for the draft. He got his draft grade, didn't like where he was graded at, and chose to come back to college and take a sum of $4 or $5 million from Miami. It's the same thing that we just saw happen with Ty Simpson over the last week, where Ty Simpson declares for the draft, and there's a rumor out there that Miami offered him $6.5 million to come back and play quarterback for him in Miami. Like that, it's the same situation. Carson Beck took the money, Ty Simpson didn't. And on that note, hats off to Ty Simpson, man. I know that I've mentioned him on this show a few times, and I've called him. I haven't, I've been critical of him at times on the show this year. But my hat's off to the kid, man. To do what he did, to stare down the barrel at $6.5 million offer from Miami and say, my blood is crimson. I'm an Alabama guy. I'm not going to go somewhere else. It would jeopardize everything I built and everything I've stood for. Talked about he's got his, he put his hands into concrete somewhere. He's left his mark on that university, and he's like, I'm not going to go anywhere else. Hats off to that kid. The world needs more like that. That's not a shot at Carson Beck for doing what he did. There's not a lot of kids Carson Beck's age that would not take that kind of money. So what are we really talking about here? What are we really trying to drive here? Are we trying to make it out to be like there's this animosity between Carson Beck and the University of Georgia? I don't think. I think we're reading into it a lot more than we're making it a lot more serious than it really is, and it's not that big of a deal. In other news, we've heard about in the last few days, Dante Moore's coming back to Oregon. Dylan Raiola transfers to Oregon. Don't know if Dylan Raiola knew that Dante Moore was coming back before that decision was made. Either way, we don't want to speculate, and we don't want to say, like, Dan Lanning pulled Dylan Raiola aside and said, hey, man, you're going to be the guy next year. I don't think that happened, but Dante Moore coming back makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, when we talk about a couple things, and I've talked about this with some people already, thing that makes no sense to me is Dante Moore is projected right now, in some draft boards, some mock drafts have him as high as the number 2 overall pick behind Fernando Mendoza. Based on the Sport Track estimates, number 2 overall pick in this year's NFL draft, the number 2 pick is going to get a 4-year deal worth $52.5 million, fully guaranteed, and a contract that includes a signing bonus in the neighborhood of $30 to $34 million. So the question is it really worth potentially coming back, playing college one more year, risk the injury, and losing out on that money? Because if a kid like Dante Moore's coming back to Oregon for, let's just throw a figure out there and say $4 million. Let's say Oregon's offering him $4 million to come back and play quarterback next year. You're leaving potentially, according to Sport Track, you're leaving potentially $86.5 million on the table to come back to Oregon and play another year of college football. Why? If I had Dante Moore sitting right here, that would be the question. Like, make it make sense. Like, all of that money, 100% guaranteed for your 4-year deal, and then the signing bonus that you're going to get on top of that. Like, make it make sense. I understand you don't want to get you don't want to get drafted to a bad situation. You don't want to get drafted to a team that you don't feel like is going to best serve your interest or it's going to work out for you. But that's the issue with being a good college football player. You're going to get drafted to the worst NFL teams. It's a tale as old as time. It happens. But to stare that amount of money in the face and say, no, I'm going back to college, I don't know, man. I mean, if it's me, I'm taking the money. I'm going to the NFL. If my draft grade's that high, you're not going to get much higher than that, and you're not going to be the number 1 overall pick next year. So I don't know what he's holding out for. You can only, you think if he's like, well, I come back next year and I ball out, I'll be the number 1 overall pick. Well, the money difference is not too much between 2 and 1. I mean, it is, but it's not a gigantic difference. And you're talking about potentially $86.5 million as the number 2 overall pick. Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. And if anything, Dante Moore needs to look at, and needs to take a good, long, hard look. And the decision's passed now. I mean, it's too late to declare. But the decision to do this is crazy when you look at a guy like Drew Aller. When you look at a guy like Cade Klubnik, who last year those 2 guys' draft grades were in the first round. Well, Drew Aller's was. I can't remember exactly where Cade Klubnik was on that a lot of the mock draft boards, but Drew Aller was a upper first round pick, and then he decides he's going to come back to Penn State, play another year, maybe run down a championship, and gets hurt, loses his coach. You watched Penn State this year. You watched Penn State this year and you saw it. Just a nightmare scenario for Drew Aller. I guarantee you if I had him right here and you asked him, he probably wished that he would have taken the money, gone to the draft. But you know what they say, hindsight's 20/20. And we can We can talk about that all we want. What's past is past. Hindsight's 2020. But Drew Aller probably looks back on that and thinks, man, I should have really taken the money. I should have probably went pro, in the first round, and we would have been in a completely different spot, going forward here from that. So something to think about. Like I said, I'm puzzled about the decision from Dante Moore to stay, but either way, what's done is done. He's made his decision. He's coming back, regardless of what I think about it, and regardless of what a lot of people think about it. It's a done deal. Another thing I'd like to jump into, and this was a conversation that I had with some people earlier this week that was really an intriguing conversation to me, and I wanted to talk about it and address it here on the show a little bit because I wanted to, I enjoy engagement. Like when I talk about these topics, I love it when people that listen to the show text me, call me, reach out to me on social media, whatever, and offer their opinion and say, hey man, I agree with you on that, or here or whatever. If they disagree with me, they can say stuff, like I disagree with you and here's why. And I appreciate that. I mean, I'm always one to engage in healthy debate. Now, when the debate gets, to me, I draw the line when the debate gets personal, and there have been times when that happens, in the social media world, but it's really easy to be tough and take personal shots at people when you're on the other side of a phone screen or a keyboard or whatever else. But, it's easy to do that in today's day and age because we have a lot of weak people that are walking around amongst us in the world. And, like I said, very easy to sit behind a computer screen or a phone screen and type up that, zinger tweet that you got, and you think you're doing something and you're really not. You're making yourself look like an idiot. So it's really not to me, it's not a big deal when somebody disagrees with me. If you want to reach out and you want to disagree and you want to have a healthy conversation, I'm fine with that. But the moment that you take it too far, it's stupid and it's childish. But this is a topic. It's been all over ESPN. It's been all over Fox. It's been all over a lot of these networks. And I know you've probably seen it too. And has the Big Ten overtaken the SEC as the premier conference in the country? And is the SEC's dominance over? Because we saw the SEC the last 2 decades have been dominated by the SEC. Then we get NIL, we get the transfer portal, we get a lot of different things, and it changes, turns on its head, and it's completely introduced a lot of parity into the sport. And my answer to this. And here's my thing, and I am not everybody knows, and I've mentioned it multiple times on this show, I'm a Georgia fan, but I'm not going to sit here like a lot of people do. I'm not going to sit here and be all rah, SEC, go SEC. Like, what? No, like, I'm a Georgia fan. To heck with everybody else. I don't care. If the SEC loses all but one game in bowl season, and that one game that's won is by Georgia, I don't care. I'm not going to sit there and watch Michigan play Texas and cheer for Texas because they're the SEC. You got to cheer for the SEC. It's a conference thing. No, to heck with them. Can both of them lose? That's the way I look at it. I don't care. I don't do the whole second favorite team. No, it's Georgia and no one else in this house. Nothing else. Like, I don't understand where we got to this point where we will defend our conference just as hard as we defend our team that we cheer for that's in the conference. Just because Georgia happens to play in the Southeastern Conference doesn't mean that I'm going to go to bat for Ole Miss, or I'm going to go to bat for LSU, or I'm going to go to bat for Alabama, or I'm going to go to bat for any of these teams. To heck with them. Georgia's my team. I'm going to defend Georgia. I'm going to roll with Georgia. I'm going to cheer for Georgia. I don't care what everybody else does. But the conference discussion, and my answer to this actually shocked some people when I said this. Because here's the clear-cut and honest answer from Colby from After the Whistle. Here it is. Like, press your record button if you want to. The answer to, has the Big Ten overtaken the SEC as the premier conference in college football? The answer to that question from me, yes, they have. The Big Ten's top 3 teams versus the SEC's top 3 teams, I think the Big Ten's winning 2 out of those 3 games, if not all 3. And I'm not saying that if Georgia played Indiana this weekend, Georgia would definitely have a chance to win. Definitely 100%. I'm not saying that Indiana would smoke them. Indiana would beat them by 20 points, whatever. But to me, right now as it sits, the last 2 national champions have come from the Big Ten. This year you have another Big Ten championship, or you have another Big Ten champion playing for a national championship. If the Big Ten wins a 3rd in a row, this answer for me will be validated. Because of the fact, and I feel like NIL and transfer portal, and everybody can speculate and everybody can talk about whatever they want, and they can say, oh man, well, it's because they can pay players now. You know, the SEC was paying players for 20 years, and now all of a sudden everybody else can pay players, and now the playing field's level. There's been instances of that happening. Tennessee with McDonald's bags and cash full of, McDonald's bags full of cash and this and that. There's been instances of that. But to act like it was some epidemic across the Southeast where every team was forking over, thousands upon thousands of dollars for these athletes is just not there. It could be the fact that the main reason the SEC was so good for 2 decades is because of the depth that SEC rosters had. And that's my argument, is the reason that the SEC was so good, the reason that those Georgia teams in 21 and 22 were so good, the reason that Bama team in 2020 was so good, the reason LSU in 19 was so good. I mean, you can name all of these teams and you can say that they were deep. Georgia's 2s and arguably their 3s were starters in any other conference those 2 years in 21 and 22. I mean, you go back and look at the draft picks that came off of that roster that won the national championship in back-to-back years. It's unheard of. And then the starters that got drafted got replaced by the rotational guys the following year. They were starters. They got drafted. The revolving door of talent that was on these offensive and defensive lines. So SEC's line is a line of scrimmage league. We've heard that enough. We've heard that a lot. But the amount of talent that was there is what separated the SEC from other conferences. Geography was a big advantage for the Southeastern Conference because of the fact of how many of the big-time players in the league come from the Southeast. When you got states like Georgia and Florida and LSU and a lot of big-time talent in these states in the Southeast. Then you add Texas into the fold with Texas and A&M, and you have a lot of talent in this region. And now with the introduction of NIL, players don't want to be a rotational guy anymore. They want to be starters. Georgia would have a 5-star left tackle, and there'd be a 4-star behind him. Well, that 4-star knows that he can go to Texas Tech, he can go to Indiana, he can go to Florida State or Clemson or wherever, and he could start almost immediately. Like that's what this era of college football has introduced, and this is why the SEC is no longer at the advantages that they were on that 2-decade run that they went on, essentially, where they won 16 national championships. And, I mean, don't get me wrong. The SEC is still a very talented league. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying that the SEC's washed and that, they're not, we're not going to see an SEC national champion for a while or nothing like that. We could see one next year. We definitely could. But I'm saying in this very present moment, today, January 16th, 2026, the Big Ten has overtaken the SEC by way of being just the dominant conference. The Big Ten plays the type of football that the SEC played when the SEC was as dominant as they are. You look at Indiana at the line of scrimmage. You look at Ohio State at the line of scrimmage. Those teams play like SEC teams back when the SEC was dominating college football. And this isn't saying that the dominance is over. This isn't saying that the run is over like I mentioned a few minutes ago. This is me just simply saying that right now in this very present moment, the Big Ten is the best conference in college football. Top to bottom. And that's just where we're at right now. And as an SEC, as a fan of an SEC team, yeah, I don't enjoy saying that. Sometimes you just gotta be real. You gotta be real. You gotta say it. And that's just where we're at right now. But and also another thing that kept the SEC, and there was player retainage. A lot of these schools were able to retain players because they were winning championships. And the reason is players wanted to win a national championship. Players wanted to play in the SEC championship. They want to win a ring. They want to do. And a lot of these schools were able to retain those players because those players knew they weren't going to go anywhere else and have a good of a chance to win a national championship as they did at Alabama or LSU or Georgia. Now, that player can transfer, that 4-star that has been at Georgia for 2 years, hasn't seen the field much. Yeah, he can transfer to Indiana, and he's got just as good of a shot at winning a national title as Georgia does on a given year, especially the last 2 years. I mean, not Indiana 3 or 4 years ago, but Indiana the last 2 years. Just as good of a chance to win the championship as Georgia. So I know it might be shocking for you to hear me say that, but yeah, that's where we're at in college football today. All right, so I'd like to give a special shout out. Have to take a dig at some people for a second and give a special shout out to this group of people. Texas fans, congratulations. You won the preseason championship again. So we were already writing Texas in to play for the national championship and crowning them the national champion next year because they got Cam Coleman. So I'd like to go ahead and get ahead of this and congratulate Texas on winning the 2026 national championship. Congratulations to the Texas Longhorns. Yes. Round of applause for them, everybody. Awesome. All right, moving on. I'm gonna get some comments. I'm gonna get some texts about that one. All right, the moment everybody's been waiting for here: national championship. We've got Indiana. We got Miami in Miami, and we're gonna preview this football game now and go into talking about this. And I'll give you who I think is gonna win this game at the end. Once I get done with my analysis, we'll talk about it, and then I will tell you who I think is gonna win. We're going to see a couple things that I really am looking forward to looking at, a couple storylines that I'm really eager to watch in this game. It's going to be the fact that Indiana, as good as they are at stopping the run and as good as they are on the line of scrimmage, the key matchup for me in this football game, the key matchup, the matchup that I would just circle, is going to be this Miami offensive line versus this Indiana defensive line. And when you look at, I know we've heard a lot over the last few days about the size difference. When you look at the size of Indiana, a little bit on the small side on that defensive front, and then you look at the Miami offensive line that is full of behemoths. I'm talking, you got guys on that offensive line, 6'7", 340. And Indiana, you've got guys on that defensive line, 6'2", 250, 260, 6'3", 260. Like, they're being outweighed up front by 50, 60, 70 pounds across the board. The question here is, which of those, what wins here? Speed? Does speed win? Or does the size advantage benefit Miami? Because Indiana, as good as they are at stopping the run, why the biggest thing with them is as good as they are, I don't think they have seen a offensive line as big, strong, and talented as they're gonna see Monday night with this Miami front. And so that to me is the key matchup. That if I'm having to list the matchups I'm looking forward to watching the most in this football game, that's number one. Number two, another matchup that I'm eager to watch, if we flip that and we flip that coin, is this Miami pass rush against this Indiana offensive line. Akeem Mesidor, Reuben Bain, these guys are game wreckers. We saw them against Ole Miss, not able to get to Trinidad Chambliss, mainly because of the quick game that Ole Miss runs and the fact that Ole Miss gets the ball out so fast. And then when you have an athletic quarterback who can scramble, who can, do all of those things, it's really hard sometimes to break through, get sacks, affect the quarterback to a point when he's getting the football out in less than 3 seconds. All that offensive line for Ole Miss had to do was hold up for like 2.5 seconds, and the ball was out. So it really negated Miami's pass rush. And this Indiana offense, to me, is a little bit different when we're comparing styles of the two teams. We're looking at this, this Indiana front or this Indiana O-line. And we're looking at Miami, and we're thinking, can they get to Fernando Mendoza? Fernando Mendoza is not Trinidad Chambliss. He doesn't have the escapability. He's a very clumsy runner. Now, he's effective. He's fast enough to extend some plays, but he's not fast enough to outrun Reuben Bain like Trinidad Chambliss is. So the question is, can Miami get home? And I think that's the matchup number two that I'm going to circle, is Indiana's O-line holding up against that pass rush. Like, are they able to? Because I'm telling you, if we know that Indiana, disciplined football team, they don't make mistakes, they don't turn the ball over, they don't do anything of that sort. And you very, 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 very rarely see this Indiana team in 3rd and long. The average, this playoff, I think the average 3rd and distance for Indiana is less than 4 yards. It's something stupid. It's like 3.39 or something yards to go, or 3.9 or something like that, yards to go on 3rd down. They're very efficient, and it's no secret that when you look at their 3rd down percentage during the season, they're top 5 in the country in 3rd down conversions, because they get to a point where it's, they're constantly, seems like they're in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2. You don't ever see Indiana in 3rd and 15, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13. You always see them to where it's a very manageable 3rd down. They have the whole playbook at their disposal. They can run up, they can do a run play, they can do a pass play. The whole playbook's open for them on 3rd downs. That's a luxury for this offense. And likewise, they convert a lot of 3rd downs. They keep the chains moving. They keep away from the other offense. And so if that's, if the line of scrimmage is the two matchups that I'm really honing into in this game, the other one that I'm looking at is Carson Beck versus this Indiana secondary. I think, and this is just speculation, this is just me just giving my opinion, I think Miami has the best rushing attack that Indiana is going to see or has seen this year with Mark Fletcher and that offensive line. I do feel pretty confident that Miami will be able to run the football. To what extent? Will they be able to run for 4 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry? Who knows? Remains to be seen. I do feel like that they will have some success in running the football, and I do feel like that they will have enough success to keep Indiana's defense honest. That's where Carson Beck comes into play, running off of play action and everything else is, can he make all the throws? When you got guys like D'Angelo Pons on the backside, just ball hog guy. We saw what he did against Oregon with the pick 6 to start the football game. You can't do that if you're Carson Beck. This needs to be a very mistake-free game for this Miami Hurricane offense and for Carson Beck, because Indiana's a team that's going to capitalize on your mistakes, and they're not going to make mistakes. So it's a very, it's a very bad situation when you start to turn the ball over against this Indiana football team. Just ask Oregon and Dan Lanning how it went for them. You turn the ball over, they're going to put points on the board with your turnovers. They're one of the best teams in the country in converting turnovers into points. I think they're actually the number one team in the country in converting turnovers into points. So you can't do that. So what I'm trying to say is, and I'm not trying to be discouraging to Miami, I'm not trying to say it's an uphill battle or it's a losing battle or whatever. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that Miami, you have to bring your A effort. Have to. We saw your B effort against Ole Miss, in my opinion. You got to bring your A effort on both sides of the football. You got to play clean football. You got to play keep away, keep Mendoza, keep Surratt, keep Hemby, Black, Cooper. Keep them off the field. Becker, who's a stud too, by the way. Keep them off the field. If you can follow the formula, what I really liked about Miami in the Ole Miss game was the fact that they held the football for over 41 minutes in time of possession. That is a key stat there. I don't think they're going to hold the ball that long in this game. They're not going to hold the ball for 40-plus minutes. That was just the fact that a lot of that had to do with the Ole Miss's style of offense. Quick game. They don't take a lot of time off the clock. Ole Miss could go 3 and out and only take 30 seconds off the clock. So, that to me, it's a little bit different scenario with Indiana. But if Miami could hold the football for 34 minutes or 35 minutes, if they could get to that point, if they could get somewhere in there, 34, 35 minutes, I feel like that is an advantage for them, and that is a really good spot to be in. Now, it's easier said than done because Indiana's going to try to do the same thing. They're going to run the football with Hemby and Black. They're going to work RPO. They're going to work their RPO game, work their play-action game with Cooper and Surratt and Becker. A lot of weapons at Mendoza's disposal. And so, they're going to come in with the same game plan. Kurt Cignetti wants to run the football. Mario Cristobal wants to run the football. I feel like because of that, I feel like it's more of a low-scoring game than what a lot of people are trying to think that, I've seen some people think that we're going to see a shootout in the national championship. I really don't see that happening. Currently, though, the line is moved from where it was. The line opened at 7.5 Indiana's way. Now it's at 8.5. So a lot of money coming in for Indiana to win this football game, and the spread just has moved a point since they released it. And so, to me, that's a big spread for a title game. I mean, there's even people that have been talking about, we could see another blowout in a national championship game. Obviously not like the one that we saw, a few years ago with TCU and Georgia. But a lot of people are thinking this is a 2 to 3 score win for the Indiana Hoosiers, and I wouldn't be so sure. I love the brand of football that Miami's been playing over the last month. I love the toughness. I love how they establish the line of scrimmage. I love how they run the football. And as long as Carson Beck takes care of the football, doesn't throw any interceptions, and as long as Miami doesn't put the ball on the turf and doesn't commit a whole lot of penalties and give Indiana free first downs and free yardage, Miami can hang with Indiana. I mean, Miami could be right there at the end of the game with a chance to win. But they've got to check those boxes. You can't screw around. You can't put the ball on the turf. You can't throw interceptions. You can't commit dumb penalties. We saw them do that against Ole Miss. Couple personal foul penalties late in that game. Gave Ole Miss life. One of them's on 3rd down where you had them stopped and you commit a stupid penalty, give them a first down. You cannot do that against a team like Indiana that plays very mistake not mistake free because they're not perfect, but very minimal mistakes. And, a lot rides on, we've got the playmakers for Miami. You got Malachi Toney. You got a lot of these guys. And then a lot rides on him as well and what he's able to do and the game changer that he can be. And don't get me wrong, I've tossed around, like, I've talked about this game. I've been like, man, I really don't know. Like, part of me is like Indiana. Part of me is Miami. And I wouldn't say it's a coin flip for me because I've been on the opposite side of Indiana. I've been on the bad side of Indiana, a couple times this playoff season so far where I've picked against them and they've proven me wrong. And you look at Indiana, they've just been absolutely throttling opponents the last two playoff games, 38-3 against Bama, 56-22 against Oregon. Seems like, they're almost like Thanos in the Avengers. It's almost like inevitable. But there's something about Miami, something about that defense, something about the brand of football that they play that has kind of kept me toeing the line for the last few days and really diving in and really thinking about this game and really thinking, where I want to be at or, who I want to pick. Tickets are $2,750, by the way. The lowest ticket. I got a notification earlier today from Game Time said tickets as low as $2,750. I was like, low? Brother, that ain't low. That's crazy. But, hey, if you got it, spend it. Go see a good football game. I feel like it really is going to be a good football game. I like the final score to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20-16, 20-17, somewhere in that neighborhood. Currently, the over and under is I think it's 48.5, if I'm not mistaken. I like it to be under, just because of the fact that I feel like this is going to be somewhat of a defensive struggle. I feel like we could look and see that at halftime this game could be 7-3 at halftime, 7-6 at halftime. I mean, I really do think that. I think these teams are going to take a minute to settle in. The defenses are going to rule the first half. Second half, it's going to be about who makes plays and who makes more plays. And given what I watched last week or in the last game, given what I saw out of this Indiana offense and the throws that Mendoza was able to make to these receivers, to Surratt, to Becker, to Cooper, what I was able to see there, I'm going with Indiana. I'm picking Indiana. Sorry to my Miami friends. Sorry to my, I've got a couple good friends of mine that are Miami fans. Sorry. I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I know you're going to listen to this and I'm going to get a text. I'm going to get a call. But I've got to go with Indiana. I trust Mendoza more than I trust Carson Beck, and I feel like it's going to come down to quarterback play, who makes key throws in key moments. I like how disciplined Indiana is. Miami's discipline has been a little shaky. I feel like if they start giving Indiana free first downs, it could get, it's definitely not playing in their favor. So I like the Indiana Hoosiers to win this football game. I'm going to go with 20-16. I'm going to go with the under, but I like 20-16. I like it to be a low-scoring affair, somewhat like what we saw in the Big Ten championship. I really like a, back-and-forth defensive struggle type football game. Really like it. But ultimately, though, really looking forward to, the conclusion of the college football season. It's been a long season, for these teams. I mean, this is the 16th game for both these teams, So, it's been a long season. It's been a fun one. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed talking, college football with y'all. We still got another episode to recap the national championship, and then the schedule will kind of change. So to give y'all kind of an idea of what's going to be going on with the show going forward. Last year, what I did was after the national championship, I did I didn't record until the season started, or like a week before the season started this year. we're still workshopping a few things. I'm still tossing around some ideas. I'd like some listener input as well on how we need to handle it, because during the off season, there's just not a lot of content that's out there to talk about for two times a week, essentially. So I've tossed around the idea of doing one episode a week or one episode every other week. I also heard the idea of somebody saying once a month. I just don't know what the frequency of the episodes should be. So please feel free, reach out and give your thoughts on that. How often you want to hear from me during the off season, because we will have a lot of stuff to talk about. We have we have spring football, we have everything else. We have a lot to preview. There's definitely some content. We definitely drum up some stuff to talk about. But I'd like to know how often that y'all would like to hear from me during the off season, because I'm not going to do what I did last year and take the break like I did and then just y'all not hear from me for few months and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm back. So don't want to do that, but by all means, reach out and let me know what you think. But that's been another episode of After the Whistle. Appreciate you tuning in, and national championship coming up. Really hoping for a good game, really hoping for a very electric conclusion to the college football season. Going to end it on a high note, hopefully, with a good game. I know you'll be watching, as will I. I'll have something on the grill. I might have some people over hanging out. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's to conclude with that. I have really enjoyed it this year, and hope you continue to tune into the show. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend and Monday night. Enjoy the national championship. We'll be here to talk about it next week. I'll probably record on Tuesday, release an episode on Wednesday, just because of the way, like I said earlier in the show, the calendar's just so screwed up. We're going to do it that way. So it's been another episode of After the Whistle. Thank y'all for tuning in.